There is. Dad, handout. Oh, y'all are good. We still got a couple minutes. I didn't realize he's already got me live back there. I know. Hot mic. Does anybody else need a handout that didn't get one? And everybody's quiet, so I guess everybody's just ready to jump in. So before we get started, I've asked John Biles to lead us in an opening prayer.
Dear Lord, we thank you this evening for the comfort of this place that we come to worship you, for the peace we enjoy as a nation, for this wonderful family of your children and our brothers and sisters who have come here to be led and taught, learning from the scriptures, from your word. We thank you, dear God, for everything that you do for us, especially Jesus. And we know, dear Lord, that you have determined from the beginning of time that we would have peace and a home with you in heaven if we would but obey your word and obey your will. It's our desire in life to do that, to love one another, to demonstrate we're your children. We thank you and praise you for everything you do for us in Jesus' dear name. Amen.
All right. Well, thanks for being here. We're going to be in Daniel chapter 3 tonight. We're going to kind of just recap just the last little bit there of Daniel chapter 2, but if you want to turn to Daniel chapter 3, we're going to be kind of right there, the end of 2, and obviously starting 3 tonight. I was telling Tim Hill before we get started, this has been it's been really fun to teach this 2 quarters in a row because I feel like it's going to really sink in. I will really have a good handle on Daniel, I think, by the time we're done with this quarter. It's just an amazing account of this period in time and God's faithful people and seeing the things that are playing out, things that God said were going to happen a long time before they've happened, and then the things that obviously play out as we go through kind of the history side of it. I know not everybody in here is a history buff. We kind of said that at the beginning of this class, but I would encourage you, if you can follow along with just kind of the major points of it, it really does show kind of the way those 400 years that, a lot of times we've kind of grown up hearing that referred to as a period of silence. But if we look at what, God prophesies through Daniel, that's really everything that kind of happens during that time. Like, we see it play out. I mean, so it's not like God wasn't speaking. The scriptures, his word is speaking through that time. And so it's really amazing to see these things kind of outlined for us as we look back and we try to put ourselves in maybe Daniel's shoes or like his friends we're going to read about tonight and the things they went through. Just really powerful testimony of God's power and his hand and the events that happened in the lives of men. So tonight, like I said, we're going to be in Daniel chapter 3. We've got that titled A Battle of Wills. And if we kind of look at where we've been so far through this story of Daniel, we've seen some trials, right? We kind of laughed at the last quarter. It's like trial by vegetable. And the things that happen with those young men at an early age. And kind of being brought into this new place and new everything, and probably scared to death in a lot of ways, but the way they held their composure and the way that they stood for the things that they knew to be right and to be true, and we see them pass that test, obviously, those trials. We just looked at, in the last class, Daniel chapter 2, with this vision, this dream that Nebuchadnezzar has, and kind of the fear that's brought upon all these sort of people in his political cabinet, essentially, that are unable to interpret this, not even tell him what the dream's about, and certainly not able to interpret it. We see Daniel kind of step in there very bravely and courageously, and kind of answers the call, and the Lord reveals this to him, and he's able to reveal it to the king, and just really an amazing thing. And tonight we're going to talk about trial by fire. We said at the outset of this class, there's a lot of things, if we were to ask just kind of the average person, what do you know about the book of Daniel? Daniel in the lion's den and the fiery furnace are kind of the two things that a lot of times would pop up, because we've learned that stuff since we were kids. There's obviously a lot more in the story of Daniel, but this is one of those just amazing, amazing stories out of Scripture that really should be an inspiration to us. So I'm excited to get into that tonight. Just a couple of things I want to just try to, again, kind of set some basis, some foundation for us tonight as you think about kind of this chronology of kind of these events that are happening, because you can't talk about Daniel without the history side of this. We started off this book reading about those things that happened there with essentially the people of Israel, or the Jews being brought captive over into Babylon. That's around 605 BC. The vision somewhere shortly after that. We're now somewhere a little later into the equation. We don't really know. We're going to talk about the timing of that. But the book of Daniel, like we said, it's not written chronologically. So we're not going to study it chronologically, I'll say that. We're going to kind of jump around. So we're going to go through 3, 4, and then jump to 7. We're going to kind of follow the actual timeline of Daniel. And so we're going to kind of jump around a little bit. And I know that may seem a little confusing, but hopefully it'll kind of come together at the end. That runs us all the way down to what we think, what historians, what Bible scholars think was kind of the end of Daniel's life. That was around 534 BC, we think, somewhere in that time frame. So when we kind of do the math there, this book runs us from about 605 to about 534. It's kind of about that timeline that we see. I know this is probably going to be a little hard to see, but one of the things I just wanted to point out is we look at kind of that timeline. Some of the other men that were contemporary during this time, you've got Ezekiel, you've got Jeremiah as well, kind of right here, similar time frame as Daniel. They're a little older, but it's just worth pointing that out. So when you go and read from some of those prophets, it should kind of click a little bit of the things they're talking about are kind of happening simultaneously here. So I wanted to cover just the last little bit there in Daniel chapter 2, because I know we didn't really get a good chance to read that on Sunday, but I'm just going to read these verses. So this is at the very end of Daniel chapter 2, right? So Daniel has, through the Lord, revealed what this dream was that King Nebuchadnezzar had, and interpreted it on top of that. And it says in verse 46, "Then King Nebuchadnezzar fell upon his face and paid homage to Daniel, and commanded that an offering and incense be offered up to him. The king answered and said to Daniel, 'Truly, your God is God of gods and Lord of kings, and a revealer of mysteries, for you have been able to reveal this mystery.' Then the king gave Daniel high honors and many great gifts, and made him ruler over the whole province of Babylon and chief prefect over all the wise men of Babylon. Daniel made a request to the king, and he appointed Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego over the affairs of the province of Babylon, but Daniel remained at the king's court." So similar, we said there's a lot of parallels that happen kind of in the life of Daniel that we see in the life of Joseph in Egypt, and Joseph's kind of granted all these things there in the kingdom there in Egypt. Similar thing that we see kind of start to play out here with Daniel, continuing to be blessed and elevated in these positions under the rule of King Nebuchadnezzar. So from the end of that, we jump into the beginning of Daniel chapter 3. Again, we're going to talk a little bit about the timing here. We don't really know how much time has passed between these two events taking place. but we maybe have some guesses there. So, yeah.
Nebuchadnezzar refers to as your God.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't acknowledge that he's the God of the universe, the creator. He's still Daniel's God. Even though he's impressed with what's happening and amazed, it's still your God.
I want us to get into, as we kind of see this event play out, I want us to kind of think about King Nebuchadnezzar's state of mind and kind of where he's at with his faith. We'll get to that because that's a great point. So let's just read here, first little part here of Daniel chapter 3. It says, King Nebuchadnezzar made an image of gold whose height was 60 cubits and its breadth 6 cubits. He set it up on the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. Then King Nebuchadnezzar sent to gather the satraps, the prefects, and the governors, the counselors, the treasurers, the justices, the magistrates, and all the officials of the provinces to come to the dedication of the image that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. Then the satraps, the prefects, and the governors, and the counselors, the treasurers, the justices, the magistrates, and all the officials of the provinces gathered for the dedication of the image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. And they stood before the image that Nebuchadnezzar had set up. So, some things are happening here. We're going to come back around to these people that are here, but I wanted to point out just a couple things. I know this map, again, it's not, you probably can't see it great, but this is basically the Babylonian Empire roughly around when this time is taking place. It kind of spans all the way from Egypt all the way over to the Persian Gulf, up there into southern Turkey. Babylon's kind of, it's that little red circle if you kind of look over on the right. That's where the city of Babylon is. And if we kind of blow that up a little bit more, Babylon's kind of right there close to, this is kind of where the Tigris, the Euphrates are all kind of coming together. For modern day perspective, this is really close to modern day Baghdad. So if you were to look up on Google Maps and go look and see where Baghdad is, the city of Babylon, the ancient city of Babylon, was about 55 miles south of Baghdad. So just to kind of bring it to life for us, give us a little bit of perspective here. This plain of Dura, we're not really sure exactly where that was. Historians think that it was probably a few miles south of the city of Babylon. That term, it's a little tough for us to know because that term Dura is actually kind of an ancient term across Mesopotamia that basically just said it was kind of a walled city, which there would have been a lot of walled cities, going on around that time. Trying to get to go, yeah. This is kind of an area where they think this might have been some ancient ruins kind of in that area, but walled place is kind of that Akkadian term that goes back a long, long ways. So we see this image that the king has commissioned. Dimensionally, this thing was about 90 feet tall and about 9 feet wide. That even those numbers may not really mean a whole lot to us. I'm sure it was very impressive in the way that he pulled all these people together and essentially said, hey, you're going to come bow down to this thing and worship this thing.
That's about a 7-story building.
Yeah, I mean, it would have been a big thing to look at. Here we go. Sorry, I'm clicking wrong stuff. We're not really sure what it was. Most likely it was one of the Babylonian gods. I don't think they really think he made this image of himself. It was most likely, we've talked a little bit about the Babylonian gods, and Marduk was kind of their main figure. He goes all the way back into kind of Assyrian history as well. But it's interesting, historians say the Babylonians didn't really look at their kings as like divine. I mean, they didn't think that Nebuchadnezzar was a god or anything like that, like some civilizations did, but just a couple pictures there of kind of what that stuff looked like. I don't know about you guys, when I see image of gold, does that like rustle up anything from the Old Testament that that seems familiar to us? That's immediately where my brain went, right? And you go back and read from Exodus 20, and God's giving them the law, and he says, you shall not make yourself a carved image or of any likeness of anything that is in heaven above or that is in the earth beneath or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them or serve them. Do we think Daniel's friends knew this? I'm sure they, from what the character we've already seen of Daniel and his friends, I'm sure they were raised to know the law. They probably knew exactly what was going on here, right? So very interesting to point out. Just to give us, I promise I did not do that. All right, let me back us up here. Don't peek. Okay. So just a couple things here, right? Dad said 7-story building. If you've been to the Parthenon downtown, if you've been inside of that statue of Athena, that's about 38 feet tall. Mount Rushmore, the head of George Washington, that's about 60 feet tall. And if you've been in New York City and seen the Statue of Liberty, the actual statue part, not counting the base, that's about 151 feet tall. So we're kind of somewhere in that range of George Washington's head and the Statue of Liberty. So this would have been a pretty impressive thing to see out on the plains. Yeah, and it's, kind of what we see from the Old Testament, just what we know about how they did things back then. It says it was made of gold. This thing was not like a 7-story building thing made entirely of gold. It was probably made of wood and overlaid with gold on the outside. I'm sure it still looked very impressive, probably kind of menacing out there on the plain to see. We said we don't really know how much time has passed since Daniel chapter 2. I thought it was very interesting, just doing a little bit of research on this. The Septuagint text of Daniel actually starts off saying that this was in the 18th year of the reign of King Nebuchadnezzar. I'm not really sure how that works out, because the Septuagint would have come along a little bit later. So that's one piece of evidence of maybe tells us when this happened. That would have put us around 587 BC. But there's also some interesting stuff if you go read the Babylonian Chronicles. These were kind of, again, the way they recorded all their history. These were on these little cuneiform tablets that basically where they wrote all the stuff down that happened. They actually record that there was this kind of rebellion towards King Nebuchadnezzar about 10 years into his reign. And Dad had kind of made the point, I think, in our class last time that what we could have been seeing here is essentially a test of loyalty and him kind of trying to rein everybody back in, and because he makes this decree that if you don't do this, you're going to be executed. So again, we don't know for certain, but it's interesting to go see some of these things. All right, so I'm not going to reread all this again, but who does he call to this thing? He sends word out to call these people. Who does he call?
Leaders.
Yep. Yeah. It's kind of a who's who sort of thing, right? That's what it seems like. Seems like, it's kind of everybody. It's like this is kind of a, hey, if you have anything to do with anything important, you're going to be here. So it's interesting, we saw at the end of chapter 2 how Daniel basically puts in a request that his friends are going to be put in these positions. Who's not here? As we see through the story, Daniel's not here. It's kind of interesting. So, we said last quarter, again, with his position, maybe he's back in the city doing things there. Maybe he's not been called to this. If he's in such an important position, maybe somebody's got to kind of be back home to make sure stuff's going on there. But it's interesting to note that Daniel's not present, at least that we see. So, yeah, it's kind of a who's who of the things that are going on here. One of the things that, I wanted to get in kind of a little bit of the psyche here of Nebuchadnezzar and thinking about these things. Dad kind of brought this up, but what is it, with this thing that's going on, that he's set this thing up and, kind of this call to essentially bow down and submit and worship. What is Nebuchadnezzar not understanding yet? What's that?
God's in power.
God's in power? Yep. Absolutely. There's only one God. Yeah. I think we're kind of, he's going to get there. It seems like at least more so than he is now, but at this point it seems like, okay, yeah, Daniel revealed this thing, but I'm not really understanding the situation yet. Yeah, Dan.
I've wondered about this because it feels, and I know we don't know the exact dates, they're very
Yeah.
far, because it's like a 50-year gap between this piece and when I think Belshazzar comes along.
Right.
The handwriting on the wall. But it feels like some time has gone by
Yeah.
since Nebuchadnezzar fell on his face and
I agree. Yeah, it seems like maybe he kind of has forgotten a little bit of, maybe he was impressed at the time of oh, okay, this is clearly divine because nobody can do this to reveal this dream that I had. But maybe some time has passed and he's kind of forgotten what's going on here, right?
There's no humility at all. His ego is still full bore.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. He made the point earlier. He refers to it as your God, and it seems like maybe at this point he's still kind of in that mindset of, hey, this is just another God to throw into the mix of all these gods that we already have, and I think that was kind of what we see in the ancient world, anyways, right? A lot of historians think it was the biggest city in the world, like to that point. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think, yeah, I think it's not unusual for impactful things to happen to us, and time just goes along, and it kind of dulls, and we kind of forget. You would hope that wouldn't be the case, but that seems to be, and kind of to Daryl's point too. This is the most powerful man in the world, and he is very much about himself, and we're going to see that continue out through the rest of this story. I think what I've read, most people think it was not an image of himself. They think it was an image of some kind of Babylonian god. Yeah. We don't know for sure, though, obviously.
To your point about it's been a while and people forget, look at 9/11. Everybody was praying to God, and look how now everybody's turned from God.
We have short memories.
Forgot very quickly.
Yeah. So maybe a more rhetorical question for us, because we got to keep this thing moving. But is it possible for us to acknowledge God but not really buy in? Kind of to your point, Daryl. Can we? What's that?
He was a politician.
Yeah, he was a politician. Yeah.
They attempted to kill him, but he's looking to say, hey, how many people are going to follow me,
Right.
support me?
Yeah.
That's why if you look at who he calls in, he doesn't call the common people.
Yeah.
He calls the people in power.
So I say all that, the title I put up there, think about God's patience. We've talked about this a little bit, but think about God's patience with Nebuchadnezzar. I mean, that was kind of the question I posed to Dan, I think, at the end when he was saved by the bell. But think about, why is God being so patient with this man, this pagan king that has a huge ego and all these things going on? Why is he being so patient with Nebuchadnezzar? So more of a rhetorical question to think on that. We'll keep this going here. So we're going to keep reading. It says, verse 4, and the herald proclaimed aloud, you are commanded, O peoples, nations, and languages, that when you hear the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, bagpipe, and every kind of music, you are to fall down and worship the golden image that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. And whoever does not fall down and worship shall immediately be cast into a burning fiery furnace. Verse 7, therefore, as soon as all the peoples heard the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, bagpipe, and every kind of music, all the peoples, nations, and languages fell down and worshiped the golden image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. I don't know about you guys, I would love to hear a Babylonian bagpipe, hear what that sounds like. I bet that was interesting. Just a quick note, I think this is kind of interesting. This punishment or execution by fiery furnace and burning apparently was kind of a common practice thing back then. If you go, we talked about Jeremiah being contemporary, with these events going on. If you go read over in Jeremiah 29, this is Jeremiah again prophesying, the Lord prophesying through him, talking about the things that are going to happen to these kind of false prophets. And it says they're going to be, may the Lord make you like Zedekiah and Ahab, whom the king of Babylon roasted in the fire. This was something they did back then, which sounds horrifying, but apparently this was not an unusual thing for them to do. If you go, again, we talked about some of the history, and again, this kind of part of the world. If you go read from the Hammurabi Code, actually there's certain parts through Hammurabi's Code that talk about execution, the reasons for somebody to be executed by burning them. So again, this is stuff it's not like some strange, unusual thing. Right, that code predates Moses. So this is what they did in that part of the world. Okay, so we see really the emphasis here on verse 7. What I want to talk a lot about, just the amount of pressure that would have been on somebody in this crowd, if you were not into this idea and you're there in that setting, you want to talk about peer pressure. This is it. It doesn't probably get any more intense than what we're going to see, and then what we're going to see kind of follow right up after this too. Let's put ourselves in that situation. We're sitting out on the plain of Dura. We've been called. We're Hananiah, Mishael, or Azariah, and we're sitting there, and this thing's about to go down. Would it have been easy to rationalize doing this? I think we're crazy if we're saying it would not have been easy. Hey, I don't really believe this, but I'm here, and we're being told to do it, and I submit to the king or whatever. This is kind of the position I've been put in. I think it would have been very easy to rationalize or justify the situation I've been put in here. Something that I've never really thought about until we talked about this last class. Do you guys suppose that there might have been other Jews present at this thing happening? I never thought about that. We don't know for sure. We only read about these three guys here. But it's very possible that some of these other Jews that have been brought over as captives could have been in that same crowd, right there alongside these three guys, maybe in some different part of the crowd, different job, different title, that sort of thing, but it's very possible. Did a faithful Jew have an option to succumb to the peer pressure of what's going on here? If you're really going to follow the law, and we just read from Exodus, the things that they knew to be right. Faithful Jew should not be doing this, right? I'm just put ourselves. It's real easy to read this and just think, oh yeah, well I would do that or whatever. I don't know. I think this would have been very, very hard to. Everybody bows down. If you're the one standing there that's not, it's going to be pretty easy to. You're going to be standing out. Yeah.
This is such an interesting chapter. It's fun to study. There's so many things we can learn from it.
Yeah.
What you're saying right now, I think, may be the biggest takeaway for us. How many times have we challenged and put in a situation where we're tempted to do something, we know it's not right, but we can almost always rationalize a reason why we can do it. It's okay. Maybe in this case, they thought, these are young men also, they could have thought, I'm going to live a long time. There's so much good I can do for God.
Yeah. Or I just got to get through this so I don't get killed today.
I can do so much.
Yeah.
You'll forgive me for this very temporary laugh. In my heart, He knows he's the only God. There's so many things, and we all
Absolutely, yeah.
You know they had to be, these young men's mind, the golden calf and God's anger over that.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
You know, you think about the courage of these guys. They had more courage than the Apostle Peter did. He ran. He denied 3 times. You think about that.
Yeah.
They had more courage in the face of being burned alive. And we're not to that point, but I love when they say, hey, our God, will save us. But even if he doesn't, we're still not going to worship your God.
It's astounding. I mean, it really, yeah. So we'll keep reading. I want to make sure we get through this. Therefore, at that certain time, Chaldeans came forward and maliciously accused the Jews. They declared to King Nebuchadnezzar, O king, live forever. You, O king, have made a decree that every man who hears the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, bagpipe, and every kind of music shall fall down and worship the golden image. And whoever does not fall down and worship shall be cast into a burning fiery furnace. There are certain Jews whom you have appointed over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men, O king, pay no attention to you. They do not serve your gods or worship the golden image that you have set up. Then King Nebuchadnezzar, in furious rage, commanded that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be brought. So they brought these men before the king. Nebuchadnezzar answered and said to them, Is it true, O Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the golden image that I have set up? Now, if you are ready, when you hear the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, bagpipe, and every kind of music, to fall down and worship the image that I have made, well and good. But if you do not worship, you shall immediately be cast into a burning fiery furnace. And who is the God who will deliver you out of my hands? The pressure here, right? I mean, just mounting pressure, just unbelievable. These Chaldeans, do they seem really genuine and sincere here about like the things they're saying? I don't know. They kind of seem like this kind of the snaky, kind of conniving people we see like in the movie or whatever, kind of coming up and trying to stir this pot a little bit. Yeah, I can sense there's probably some jealousy going on here, right? These are these 3 guys that kind of got put in a position of power, and these Chaldeans that are actual Babylonians may not be too cool with the things that are happening here. And they report to a Jew. They report to Daniel, right?
All of the wise men, the Chaldeans, they all report to Daniel now. These other guys run the city.
Yeah. There were a couple verses that kind of came to my brain. Again, just kind of we see echoes of these things all through the scriptures. If you go over reading Esther, when you've got that situation with Haman and Mordecai, and Haman gets really mad about the things that are going on when Mordecai didn't really give him honor and things like that. And we see over in Exodus with the plagues and those accounts. And this is Exodus chapter 5, verse 2. This is where Pharaoh said, "Who is the Lord that I should obey his voice and let Israel go?" We kind of see an echo here of this with Nebuchadnezzar, just what God's going to save you from me, basically, and these things that I'm about to do. Yeah.
I think the last phrase right here, he gets spooled up.
Yeah.
He's in a rage. The last phrase right here is the phrase to me that of all of us that do him in, he says, "Who is the God that will deliver you out of my hand?"
Yeah. He thinks he's the man. Yeah.
And we don't really know, I guess, what happened in the situation, if they had a conversation or that sort of thing. But, if you were in this situation and you were thinking, I don't think that I should bow down, you're kind of looking at, well, we're not going to bow down, right? We're going to you don't get the sense that they did that. They were in it together, they stood firm, and there was no discussion.
Yeah, we don't really see a whole lot of wavering going on. It doesn't seem like in this situation. Let's see here. Trying to get us to the next one. Yeah. It's not going for me, sorry. Maybe the battery's dying on us. Can you manually move us forward? Other direction, sorry. Oh, there we go. All right. So, I don't have like the way, I don't have sound going for us, but imagine, you know, when you've ever been in a situation, I mean, you can just hear your heartbeat in your ears, right? I mean, they're standing face to face with the most powerful man in the world who's telling them, all right, this is your second chance. Like, you're going to do this or I'm going to kill you. Put yourself in that situation, right? I mean, just think about what that would be like. I don't know, maybe we're, thanks.
It's really hard for us to relate to that.
Yeah, I mean, you know, again, kind of to Wally's point, like, we've all been in situations where maybe we've been kind of pressured into something that we're not comfortable with, but probably nothing like this, I would imagine. So really, really intense stuff here. I don't have my slides, but it's okay. So if we look at this, right, pressure's on, you know, life is on the line, and just asking ourselves that question. I mean, we've seen, you know, in somewhat recent years and heard stories and things like this where, you know, people are literally kind of posed with questions like this, but are we willing to put our lives on the line to be faithful to the Lord? You know, you brought up about Peter, and we see, you know, again, are we ever going to be put in a situation exactly like that? I don't know. You know, more than likely not. But there are Christians that live in the world today that are, and when we see, you know, we hear stories of that and see things that do happen like that.
Even on our jobs, sometimes
Yeah.
we're asked to do things that are wrong, and our lives aren't at stake, but our jobs may be at stake.
Yeah.
And it's easy to say, well, I've got to provide for my family, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, and you know, what do we learn? You know, we see this here, right? And Dan's already kind of called attention to it. Hey, we're not doing this. And, you know, the Lord can save us from this. And even if he doesn't, still not going to do it.
Yeah, you know, there's two things here, Jay, that I think about. Number one, I don't know how these guys did not make Hebrews 11. I mean,
They're in that other category, right?
yeah, it's like a footnote of quenching fire that you think may have to do with this event. But the other thing I wonder is, you know, we have these examples, these incredible examples of people who have faith beyond maybe sometimes what we even can comprehend. That's sad. And because remember that Jesus said, if you deny me before men, I will deny you before my Father. And so the question we should be asking is, you know, not really will we do it, but will we get the opportunity to do it? Because we're Christians, we are of Christ. And we kind of have a responsibility. Peter, you look how he turned his life around. He made that mistake one time, and then he turned his life around. And we should be thinking the same way.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Dan. Yeah, and I was thinking about it too, right? If what we see in Scripture and these figures through the Old Testament that are kind of shadows of and kind of, you know, tones of what we're going to see in Christ, you know, part of what stands out to me in their response here is what they say right off the bat. King, you know, we don't even have to answer you on this. Like, we have no need to answer you in this matter. It's kind of like, yeah, I mean, what are we talking about here? Like, we're ready to go right now. I mean, we don't have to talk about this. Doesn't have to be a discussion. I mean, they're standing in front of the man that can just have them executed on the spot, and they're just kind of like, yeah, we're not doing it. I mean, that's just, you know, really it is astonishing, and we should aspire to have a faith like that. It's just really powerful. So, yes.
I also think there's something in this passage here, where they're speaking to the king, and he says, and I looked at different versions, they all say the same thing. Our God, whom we are serving, is this. He is able to rescue us. But if not, we're not going to serve your God. And I think that is a lesson we talk a lot about
was going to be a question I was going to ask is, do you think these guys were praying? I got to imagine there was, maybe it was one of those real quick ones, but I bet there was some praying going on before this was about to happen.
I guess what I'm saying is that we need to be willing to accept
It's not always going to be a fairy tale ending here. Like,
what God allows to continue for His glory.
yeah.
A lot of times we think about it strictly as an end point in ourselves, but if you're truly being used in God's service, you may be used in some very difficult circumstances for His glory to others. I think we often forget that, and obviously these men, were willing to accept that.
You know, I don't think we ought to miss the point. We can draw the parallels of how our faith should be compared to theirs, but God is using this, as we see, to further humble Nebuchadnezzar.
Yeah, I think that's another takeaway we should have from this. They weren't doing this necessarily for these three guys. I mean, what we're seeing a lot of here at the beginning of Daniel is like God is being incredibly patient and doing some of these things to try to get Nebuchadnezzar's heart to change. I mean, I don't know why. I mean, why else is he doing some of these things? That was going to be a question I had. Is obviously he spares them. God does spare them in this scenario, and kind of why is it this big, drawn out, really public, really kind of supernatural spectacle, miracle kind of thing in the way he spares them? I mean, did it have to be that way? I think the evidence kind of suggests and points that he's doing this so that Nebuchadnezzar sees this. I mean, it's irrefutable in front of all these people, this thing that's about to happen. And we're going to see continued as we get into chapter 4 on Sunday. I mean, he's going to great lengths to try to get Nebuchadnezzar to realize that he is not the man. God is the one that is in control of all these things that are happening. So he's furious. He throws, imagine the hottest thing you've ever seen in your life and multiply that by 7, because that's kind of the picture we get here. They're thrown into this furnace, and I got to point it at a certain thing. Oh, here we go. And what's the amazing thing that happens? Not only are they not killed, what does Nebuchadnezzar and the guys that are there, what do they see? There's somebody else in there. He's like, I know 3 is not a hard number to count to, but I'm counting 4 people in this thing, 4 figures. Any guesses on who was in there?
What did we call him Lord? The third guy? I mean, the fourth guy?
Yeah, what does y'all's text say? How does it read? Yeah. Yeah, son, like a son of the gods. I've seen different, like the Son of God. Likely, most Bible scholars think it was probably some kind of angelic being, but there are some people that believe this is like the pre-incarnate Christ actually in there with them. Again, we don't know. We really don't know here, but God is using this miraculous thing that He's there comforting them and protecting them, and they come out. And what's incredible when they come out? I mean, what's the physical evidence that we see that the text records for us? They don't even smell like smoke. You can't even go in like a barbecue restaurant without coming out smelling like smoke. And these guys were in the furnace, and they don't have nothing's been singed or anything. They don't have any kind of smell to them. It's just astounding.
It would have likely been several thousand degrees inside there, because that's what temperatures like for a brick kiln or something like that. So we can't imagine.
Yeah, I mean, it was so hot that it killed the guys that took him up there to put him in. So I mean, there's no, we get all this evidence. This is not like a fluke. They didn't accidentally miss the fire or something. I mean, they went in the fire and they came out. It's just incredible. And what's the reaction we see from Nebuchadnezzar? He calls him out. What does he say? It's similar to kind of what we saw at the end of chapter 2, maybe a little more, again, kind of, this is the second time now that he's seen something nobody else can do. I mean, there's no other explanation here other than God has done this. This is divine, the way these guys have been saved.
And even their bindings are gone.
Yeah, I mean,
He acknowledged God. He said God sent his angel to protect. I think that's interesting. He acknowledged that fourth person as a divine being.
yes. So, we kind of think a little bit more about Nebuchadnezzar and the things that are happening here. Obviously, I would wonder too, like, what were Mishael and Azariah and Hananiah? I wonder what these guys are thinking. A lot of times we jump to Nebuchadnezzar, but what are those guys thinking when this happens? I wonder, like, how quick was it before they realized, hey, we're not dead. Like, we got thrown in this thing, we're still alive.
Walking around inside of it, you think the heat, there's no oxygen.
Yeah,
It's just a place that no one would survive. They had to be amazed.
I think so.
Had to be off the charts at this point.
Yeah, they're probably feeling on a pretty emotional high coming off of that. And then, thinking about Nebuchadnezzar on the other side of things, I mean, he's amazed. He's recognizing their God as the God. And then what does Nebuchadnezzar go to do? Yep, that's the good old threat.
Fire, didn't he? He said, these people that are immune to fire, we got to do something.
Yeah, he makes this new decree, right? That, hey, if anybody says anything against the God of these people, you're going to be executed. I mean, it's kind of back to Daryl's point. I don't know that doesn't seem like he doesn't really get it yet. Still, he's still kind of grappling with this, but I'm sure his brain's really working overtime with the things that have happened here. Just the last thing I wanted to leave you guys with, back to this kind of question we pondered a little bit tonight. Are we going to trust in the Lord no matter what? You go back and read from Deuteronomy, right? And this is kind of that famous speech here about, look, God's giving you a choice between life and death. Choose life. Don't choose death. The verse that also jumped in my mind was from Matthew 10, and this is where Jesus is essentially saying, hey, don't be afraid of people that can kill you physically. Be afraid of the God of the universe that can kill you spiritually, and eternally. So some things for us to kind of think about. It's an amazing story. We've heard it since we were kids, but really powerful for us. We're going to be on Sunday in Daniel chapter 4. So we're going to pick back up learning about God's continued efforts with Nebuchadnezzar and this, again, another dream that he has, his second dream, and we're going to really dive into that. So read chapter 4. Thanks for your comments.